Hi, welcome to rugbystrengthcoach.com. I'm Keir and I'm the rugby strength coach. I am a professional rugby strength coach with experience of working for 5 different professional teams on 4 different continents. I've got a master's degree in strength and conditioning and a bachelor's degree in sports science, and I'm a speaker and writer for various different organisations, rugby unions and higher education institutions. I also have the distinct honour of being a rather average but enthusiastic rugby league amateur player. If you haven't heard of me before, I'm the current lead strength and conditioning coach for Argentina Rugby Union, and that's me looking extremely serious last year versus South Africa in the Southern Hemisphere Championship. I've also worked as the head of strength and conditioning for the 2014 World Club Challenge champions, the Sydney Roosters in Rugby League. I've worked with the 2013 China Games Rugby Sevens champions, Shandong Province, and I've also worked as the head of Academy Strength and Conditioning for London Wasps in the English Premiership, in addition to working for Rotherham Titans and London Scottish in the English Championship. In this presentation, I'm going to be sharing with you the 5 biggest speed training mistakes that nearly every rugby player makes and what you can do to avoid them in your own training. With these tricks up your sleeve, you're going to get that extra yard of pace that's going to make the difference on the field, whether you're running down a player in defence or you're the guy running away. So you might be asking yourself, why speed, or why should I be listening to this presentation? Well, the bottom line is that speed matters. Speed is the important ability of all physical abilities that a player can possess. From those of you who follow me, you'll know that I've been influenced a lot by the old school Soviet methods of training, in particular a guy named Yuri Verkhoshansky. And in Yuri Verkhoshansky's model, which has produced a ton of Olympians, speed of movement was the end goal of the program. Strength, flexibility, body composition, power, all of them are very nice and a means to an end, but if the player didn't get faster, then the program wasn't working. And that meant they weren't jumping higher, they weren't running faster, they weren't evading opponents more easily, and they weren't winning as often. And this is something that's echoed in Western thoughts as well. Another big influence on my learning is an NFL strength coach by the name of Buddy Morris. And he said that speed is the definitive difference between the best players and those at lower levels. And that's something that I can confirm is true in rugby. I've been fortunate enough to work with rugby players from international test matches all the way down to the lowest levels of the amateurs. And I can tell you that there are big, strong players at every level. What really separates elite players from the rest is the speed that they play the game at. And if you only have to ask a young player who's just played their first international game what the biggest difference was moving up from club to international, and they'll tell you everything that you need to know. They always remark that the speed of the game was that much faster. And the great thing about speed is that it doesn't just make you faster. Because speed is so stressful to the central nervous system, it will make you stronger across the board, whether you're trying to move a maximal load, like during a scrum, or whether you're trying to accelerate a moderate load for maximum speed, like during a tackle or a ruck situation. And not only this, but you'll make yourself less injury prone to nagging things like calf and hamstring strains. And by increasing your maximum running speed, the demands of the game going on around you will get proportionately easier. They're going to tax your fitness levels less and give you an extra second on the ball to make more effective decisions. But here's the real reason that I'm sharing this presentation with you. 99% of rugby players don't train speed. That might just be through laziness, in which case I can't help you. Or it might be through a lack of knowledge or not being sure how to actually structure your own speed training. Or it might be through the flawed idea that all you need to do to get faster on the pitch is increase strength and power in the weight room. And as you'll see today, that's not the case. Now, if you do happen to fall into that minority of players who do train speed, the chances are it unfortunately probably sucks. This is because speed is perhaps the most difficult ability to improve of any of the physical abilities that you're going to train in your program. A strength coach who I'm friends with, his name's James Smith, he's coached at the international level for Portugal and also Division I college football in the States, has remarked that strength is like falling out of a boat and hitting water. There are a million different strength programs out there and they all work. Strength is an extremely easy ability to train. It can be improved via a ton of different mechanisms. Speed is much, much more taxing and much, much more difficult to train. There are a strict number of criteria that you have to achieve in order to force the body into adapting and becoming faster. And the technical demands are a lot stricter than for a strength program. So more than any other ability, when I see amateur rugby players and coaches attempt to do their own training, speed is by far the worst component of that program. So why speed? Well, we've already established it's that important that you need to be training speed. And if you're watching this, I'm guessing you're not a full-time professional player, which means that your speed training has to be done by yourself, just like it would for your weights and your conditioning work. And we've established as well that unless you're in the very, very tiny minority of players training speed by themselves, you're probably going to need help doing it. So the purpose of today is to make you aware of the top 5 speed training mistakes that I see rugby players and coaches make in their speed training. And obviously, if you want to learn how to do it right, learn from the mistakes of others. I'm going to tell you what you can do to avoid these mistakes. And also, I'm going to tell you about a brand new speed training product that I have designed specifically for rugby players and coaches. So the first mistake on our list is the idea that you only need to get stronger and more powerful in the weight room to get faster. And to illustrate why this is a mistake, I want you to imagine a Formula One car. So mistake number 1 on our list is the idea that you only need to get stronger and more powerful in the weight room to get faster. And to illustrate why this is a mistake, I want you to imagine a Formula One car. Do Formula One cars have big, fast engines? And the obvious answer is yes, they do. They've got a huge amount of horsepower, they can rev extremely fast, and so on. Likewise, the fastest rugby players have pretty decent levels of strength and power. But is that all that the Formula One team needs to consider to have that car go as fast as possible around the track? And the obvious answer again is no. You have to worry about so much more. You have to worry about brakes, suspension, wheel alignment, gearing ratios, fuel quantity, fuel mix, aerodynamics, and so on. And rugby players are no different. There are a ton of other factors that have to be considered in order to run as fast as possible. And these include technique, so how well you can apply your capacity to produce force into the ground and move yourself forward. Mobility, what's the range of motion that your joints are able to move through and apply force through? Stability, are you leaking energy through a lack of ability to prevent unwanted movement? Body composition, all of the strength, power, and technique in the world cannot help you if you're 20 kilos overweight. You're just not going to reach your potential in terms of speed. Neural factors. How well is your nervous system able to coordinate the movement that you're doing and exploit natural reflexes like the stretch reflex? And also passive tissue mechanics. What's the quality of your soft tissue like, and is it able to handle and transfer the mechanical forces of sprint running effectively so that you can run as fast as possible? Strength and power are obviously important abilities in running fast, but you cannot neglect these abilities. Neglecting these is just like a Formula One team that neglects to change the tyres, look at the suspension, look at the aerodynamics, and so on. And just an example from track and field here to illustrate this is Harry AA and Christophe Lemaitre. If you look at Harry AA in the photo on the right-hand side, you can see that he's got a huge vertical jump, massive amounts of strength, massive amounts of power. And if you look at his YouTube page, you can see that he squats, front squats 200 kilos, cleans in the mid 100s. He's an extremely powerful athlete. Contrast him to Christophe Lemaitre, who apparently when he first started weight training, snatches around 60 kilos, back squats around 80 kilos. By no means impressive numbers. He's definitely the weaker of these two athletes. Yet in this race pictured, it was Christophe Lemaitre who actually won, and it was Christophe Lemaitre who broke the 10-second barrier. So whatever he lacks in strength and power compared to Harry AA, clearly he makes up for more in these factors listed on the left-hand side. So for complete speed development, you have to focus on everything under this umbrella: strength and power, in addition to the factors on the left. Now, top of the list there, we have technique, and I've actually included that as a mistake in itself. So mistake number 2 is the idea that technique doesn't matter when you're performing speed training. You just have to run fast. So stick with me on the Formula One analogy. It's not just what's under the engine or all the mechanics of the car that the team has to worry about. They also have to worry about the guy that's behind the wheel. You can imagine if we stick Stevie Wonder behind the wheel of a Formula One car, it's not going to lap the track very quickly, and it's probably going to crash. A driver has to learn and develop the skill of driving to get every single drop of power out of the car and lap it as quickly as possible without breaking it. That's why Lewis Hamilton would be able to reach a faster speed in the Formula One car than Stevie Wonder. And speed is no different. It has to be a skill that is learned. If you can learn that skill and apply it on the field, you'll get faster. And often, without changing any aspect of your strength or power capabilities. And if you can do both, you're onto a real winner, and that's exactly the kind of approach that I take. But here's some points that you need to pay attention to. So using Israel Dag here, here's what he has to control to run as fast as possible. He's got to control his head position. He's got to control his shoulder positioning and arm mechanics. He's got to control his extension flexion of his elbow, hip mechanics, knee mechanics, ankle mechanics, and how he contacts the ground with his foot. And he has to think about all of these before, during, and after contact with the ground in both acceleration and top speed running to run as fast as possible. Now, acceleration and top speed running is a big topic in itself. There are lots of minor technical points that you have to be aware of to run as fast as possible. And I'm going to give you information at the end of this presentation about how you can get access to that information. However, in general terms, here's what you're looking for. In acceleration, you're looking for big, long pushes with a forward body lean and triple extension of the hip, knee, and ankle. You want to contact the ground on the sweet spot of your foot and think about pushing the floor away. Contrasting that to top speed, you're looking at much faster, sharper pushes with a tall and tight posture. We're looking for more hip extension here rather than hip, knee, and ankle. Again, you want to contact on the sweet spot of the foot, and rather than pushing the ground away, think about running over the ground and having short contacts. So in mistake number 1, we established that you actually need to be training specifically for speed in your program. Mistake number 2, we identified that it's not just a case of running fast, you actually have to consider technique. In mistake 3, I want you to imagine what the typical amateur rugby club speed training session is like. Here's how it's probably going to go. Rep number 1, you sprint as fast as you can. At the end of that, you jog back to the beginning. Once you're back at the beginning, you go again as fast as you can and repeat that for 10, 20, 30 minutes, however long your session is. The problem with this session is that the rest is too short. And this is because we know from research and anecdotal experience that to develop maximal speed, we need to train the central nervous system with maximal intensity. And to train with maximum intensity, we need to allow for full recovery between reps. Any shorter and the residual fatigue means that you can't produce the necessary forces to stimulate your nervous system into adapting. All you do is just get more fatigue without any of the benefits. Now, a famous sprint coach pictured here on the right of the picture is Charlie Francis, and he used 95% as his threshold for speed work. All of the reps had to be performed at 95% of your best speed for the day or higher. Any slower and the work wasn't of high enough quality to stimulate speed gains. Now, I recommend that my clients and athletes, when they perform speed training, to use anywhere between 3 to 4 minutes per 10-meter sprint, and then rest an additional 60 to 90 seconds per additional 10-meter sprint. All of your reps have to be above 95% of your best speed for the day, and all of your rest periods have to be full and complete. Just like you can't have a baby in 4.5 months if you try twice as hard, you can't recover from sprint work in 1 or 2 minutes if you try twice as hard. Mistake number 4. Look at these photos, and if you haven't seen one of them in a speed training session that you've done, I will give you £50. Now, obviously, I'm not going to give you £50 just in case it bankrupts me, but I would be incredibly surprised if you've been training for any appreciable time and you haven't seen one of these tools used in a speed training capacity, namely sleds, speed ladders, and parachutes. Now, of course, these are designed to help, and they're sold as tools that can accelerate speed development, but they almost always hinder speed development because they either shouldn't be used at all or they get used in an inappropriate way. Now, the big reason for this is that the addition or removal of a load to a running movement can substantially change the mechanics of that movement. And that means that if you haven't yet mastered the correct posture and technical movement of acceleration or top speed running, without a resistance, it's going to get a whole lot uglier when you strap on a sled, a bungee, or whatever. So you can see here in the picture on the right, we have a guy who's exhibiting excellent acceleration mechanics. So if you think back to what we talked about in mistake number 2, you can see that he's got a good forward lean. He's extending through his hip, knee, and his ankle, and he's got good shin angles here. Now, if we contrast this to the guy using the pushing sled on the left, you can see that he's got incomplete extension of the hip, knee, and ankle, poor shin angles, and a large degree of flexion in the torso. So in this case, the resistance has actually worsened the mechanics and is not going to transfer to increase speed on the field. Now, another mistake is to use these tools incorrectly. For example, if you use a sled or a parachute resistance for long sprints that are designed to increase maximal running speed, that can actually work against you. If you look at the mechanics of the best sprinters at top speed, it's pretty easy to see that optimal posture for running fast is tall, upright, with extremely long strides, working about the hip. The addition of a sled or a parachute simply destroys that because it inevitably causes the body to fall forward and shortens the stride length. The intricacies of what forms of resistance or resistance to use is a fairly detailed topic, so I'd advise you to only use these if you understand their impact on running technique. If not, you can still make great gains in your speed development without any special equipment at all, and just performing high quality sprint work with perfect technique. If, however, you do want to learn how to use these tools, you can find out more information at the end of this program. Now, whilst I'm here, I do have to give a special mention to speed ladders. No matter what the manufacturers or the salespeople say, speed ladders will not make you any faster. Whichever speed you run, whether you're accelerating or running at top speed, research tells us that the limiting factor is stride length, i.e. how much ground you cover with each step. The limiting factor is not stride frequency, that is how many steps you take per second. No matter who you are, whether you're a man or a woman, elite or non-elite, you're going to take around 5 steps a second. Now let's look at what ladders do. They shorten your stride and they speed up how many strides you take. This is in total opposition to what the research tells us we need to do to run faster. So take that speed ladder and go and burn it now. Now the final mistake that I put on this list is being too early to apply speed into sporting movements. Personally, I think that the application of speed to rugby-specific situations is and should be the end goal of the speed program. It doesn't matter how much faster you are on the track until you can do it on the field in a match situation. You know, when your mind is on other things, you're in a muddy field, you're carrying a ball, you have another guy hanging off you. That is the end point of the program. Until you're faster doing that, your speed training program has not worked. However, to me, this is just the icing on the cake of speed training. Amateur players and coaches are always too eager to move to applied speed training, put a ball in the hand, add competition, add decision making, and the end result is that the technique breaks down and the speed drops below that 95% threshold that's actually going to be productive in increasing speed. If you can't run perfectly at slow speed, it's probably going to suck at high speed. And if you can't do it with no distractions, it's going to fall apart even more in a game. It's not until you can run fast unconsciously and competently, which is the final stage of learning, that you'll be able to apply speed training in a rugby-specific context and increase speed on the field. Now, my preference is to introduce rugby-specific speed training in only the last week or two of pre-season, and then maybe for one session per month during the season. I'd recommend that you follow this pattern too, and to avoid the mistake that I see a lot of coaches make from the start, which is introducing rugby-specific drills from day one, without cementing technique or dedicating sufficient time and attention to training the central nervous system with a maximal intensity. So as you can imagine, getting faster on the rugby field is actually a lot more complicated than people think. There's a ton of different factors that you need to consider and balance within the program to fully build speed on the field. And that's why I've put together this latest offering. It's a 90-minute video presentation that breaks down the exact same approach that I use with my international and professional players day in and day out. And I'm confident it's the only material of its kind that is designed specifically for rugby players that's tried and tested at the highest level of the game. I'm going to give you the complete breakdown of how to get faster in acceleration and top speed from A to Z. And that's from drills all the way through to application on the field. You don't need any fancy equipment or expertise. I'm going to walk you through all of it. And you can get faster in as little as 30 to 60 minutes per week or more if your schedule permits it. And this product represents the culmination of what I've learned over the past decade of my strength and conditioning education. I've now probably spent well over £10,000 on sports science and strength and conditioning education since 2005. There's 2 degrees, 5 professional clubs, 4 different continents, and a ton of reading. So to produce this product, I've combined science and real-world coaching. I'm not an academic sitting behind a desk who's never coached a day in his life, and I'm not a coach who works with athletes every single day with nothing but bro science on his CV. I've been able to develop a scientifically sound speed training product that produces predictable, consistent results in the real world. And the good news is that whether you're Sonny Bill Williams or an average Joe, we all make the same speed training mistakes and they can all be fixed. And yes, Sonny Bill Williams does make the same mistakes that you do. So here's what you get when you purchase the Rugby Strength Coach Speed Development Guide. You're going to get a complete breakdown of the technique and physical demands of rugby speed, a list of speed training parameters that you have to hit in your own training to run as fast as possible, how to modify your speed training based on the game of rugby and more specifically your position on the field, how you should structure your speed training sessions. I'll share with you the 4-step process that I use to master rugby speed from the drill to the field. I'll give you the in-depth acceleration and maximum velocity progressions that I use with my own athletes, and I'll show you how to schedule speed training in your own week so that it complements rather than competes with the work that you're already doing. And not only that, but you're going to get a couple of bonuses involved. The first one is going to be access to a private Facebook group where you can discuss questions and answers with myself and other pro strength and conditioning coaches, and you can also meet and discuss with other members of the group. And the second bonus is an 8-week PDF training guide for speed development that you can take with you on your smartphone if you don't want to do the legwork of designing your own program. So you might be wondering, does it work and will it work for me? And the answer is yes. And I'm going to share with you a few of the different players that I've worked with over the past few years who have benefited from these training principles. And the first one is a guy named Flynn Sager, who was a scrum half at London Wasps Academy. He's this guy here. As you can see, extremely elastic athlete, probably one of the fastest athletes that I've ever worked with. And yet using these principles, he was still able to decrease his flying 10-meter time by 1/10 of a second, which is a massive improvement. And he increased his top running speed by nearly 1 meter per second. And he did that whilst gaining 6 kilos. Another athlete is Liam O'Neill, another London Wasps athlete. Very successful winger in the apprenticeship program. And Liam experienced the same decrease in his flying 10-meter time as Flynn, 1/10, and increased his top running speed by 0.7 meters per second. Extremely explosive athlete. Barney Madison, I'm sure he won't mind me saying, is at the other end of the scale. When we first started to work together, he was coming off an ACL rehab, was carrying a little bit of excess body fat, and was actually 110 kilos body weight. Now, despite this, by the time I left Rotherham Titans, he was actually the fastest forward in the group and ran an extremely respectable time of 1.69 over 10 meters. Now, to put that in context, that's actually a respectable time for a back in rugby union. So for him to achieve that number is extremely promising. And the final guy I want to highlight is a guy named Tau Moga. So for those of you uninitiated to the NRL, Tau is a player at Sydney Roosters who was extremely unlucky and suffered a second ACL tear last year. And he and I worked together very, very closely over the last 6 months. And in that time, we've been able to increase his top running speed on the Woodway resisted treadmill, which is essentially like a sled sprint on a treadmill. We've increased his top running speed with no resistance to 1 kilometer per hour higher. And we've done exactly the same with a resisted Woodway sprint as well. So he's gone from 4th fastest in the squad to top fastest in the Sydney Roosters squad. Now, all of these players, they're not slouches by any means to begin with. So if they can make significant improvements to their running speed, the chances are you can make just as big, if not bigger, improvements to your speed by following these principles. So yes, it will work for you no matter what your playing level. These principles work for international players and they're going to work for you. And if it doesn't, I'm going to refund 100% of your money back to you. My initial instinct was to price this product at £45, but I've decided to start at $29.99 to try and get the product out to the biggest audience possible. However, in the future, the price will go up. Now that price of $29.99 is the equivalent of only about half a tub of expensive supplements that's not going to make 1/10 of the difference to your speed that this information will. And it's about half the money that you could spend on an hour with a low quality speed coach and have nothing to show for it at the end. So when you invest in the Rugby Strength Coach Speed Guide, you're not only getting access to the 90-minute video presentation, I'm going to add you to the Facebook discussion group. You can ask me questions, you can discuss topics with other people, and you're going to get a PDF speed training guide that you can take with you on your smartphone with access to YouTube video links that will give you instruction on how to perform the drills. Like all my products, if this isn't the best rugby speed training information that you've invested in so far, please tell me and I'll refund every penny of your money. So if you want to get access to this information immediately, all you have to do is click on the button below and I'll see you on the other side.